What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. This is Total Madness for UFC Vegas 12 coming up here on Saturday. We take a look at the entire card top to bottom, and rather than picking a side, picking who's going to win the fight, we talk about will the fight go under or over based on the odds that we have got available to us. We are kicking our night off with Miles Johns taking on Kevin Natividad, and in this fight we have a total set at 2.5. The over 2.5 is minus 205. The under 2.5 is plus 165. Now bear in mind, we are headed back to Vegas. We are in the Apex. We are in the smaller cage. Generally speaking, we see that force the action quite a bit. Now in this particular fight, we've got a striker in Kevin Natividad who is taking on Miles Johns, who is a grappler with some big heavy hands. He's kind of your classic wrestle boxer. So what we're gonna see is Miles Johns looking for that takedown, looking to control Kevin on the ground. Kevin looking to do everything he can to keep this thing on the feet, and that boy has some power in his hands and a granite chin. So normally speaking, when I'm looking for an under, I like to have not one but two fighters who are going to help me cash that under ticket. In this particular spot, Kevin's the only guy I see finishing. Miles Johns is a grappling machine, and unless he's made some very, very serious jumps in his skill set, I don't see him putting away Kevin. So I think we're going to have to take a look at the over, but I don't want to lay minus 205. That final 2.5 minutes of round 3, I think, is going to be very, very sketchy, and I wouldn't be shocked if Kevin Natividad gets a knockout when Miles Johns slows down. He tends to run low on the gas tank late in his fights, so this one is very, very sketchy. If I had to make a pick, honestly, I'd still be looking at that under, because I do think Kevin is going to end this fight at some point. It's just a matter of when it happens, and because you can get Kevin at plus 150 and keep him in that decision prop area if it goes all the way to the judges' scorecards, rather than just getting that under 2.5, that's probably more the way that I'd look. Next up, we've got Cortney Casey, and she is taking on Priscila Cachoeira. Now, this is a women's fight where, once again, we always talk about it. Women's fight, more often than not, they go over. Cortney Casey's got a sit ground game on her. Priscila Cachoeira struggles with the grappling. She plods forward. She keeps her hands low, but you know what? She hits hard. This is a fight where I would be very interested in a sneaky under 2.5. We got the total here at 2.5, minus 295 to the over, almost 3-1. They're saying this thing is more than likely going the distance. However, I think that Cortney Casey could get a submission or a ground and pound TKO here. I also think that Priscila Cachoeira, like in her last fight, she's always capable of that Hail Mary knockout bomb to get her the fight. Under 2.5 at plus 235. That wouldn't be a bad roll of the dice. It's one that I'm a little bit interested in myself. Next up, we got light heavyweight Dustin Jacoby taking on Justin Ledet. Now, with the bigger boys, we've always got to be concerned with a fight ending. However, what we see from Ledet constantly is durability. The only person who's really been able to put him down was Johnny Walker, and that guy has really explosive, insane levels of power. Ledet is really a low-volume striker, mostly sticks to boxing. Dustin Jacoby is a guy that comes from Glory Kickboxing, so he's a guy that is going to have the striking advantage here. However, he's moving up a weight class. I'm not overly impressed with his power. He puts a clinic on people for 15 minutes, but he can't quite get them out of there. We got the total here at 2.5. Over 2.5 is even money, plus 100. Under 2.5 is minus 130. You'd have to lay $130 to win 100. And honestly, I'd be very interested in the over here. I think this one squeezes over. I think this is a spot where you can count on the durability of Justin Ledet and the improvements that he's been making in his last couple of fights. I don't know that Ledet actually gets the win here, but I wouldn't be surprised if he can force this thing to get to a decision and make it interesting on the judges' scorecards. We got a fight next up at welterweight. Cole Williams taking on Jason Witt. Now, Witt and Cole, these are guys who are both 0-1 in the UFC, both completely untrustworthy in my opinion. Witt's been knocked out several times. He just seems to be that guy that can't quite step up when the bright lights are on. We've got a total set at 2.5 here. Over is minus 215, under is plus 170, and this is a spot where I would be looking to bet on violence. The under here is extremely intriguing to me. Pardon me. Woo! Woo! It is that time of year, folks. Sorry about that. The under is extremely interesting here to me on this particular fight because under 2.5 getting plus 170 for either of these guys to get the finish. We haven't really seen what Cole Williams has to offer. In his first UFC fight, he really struggled. Jason Witt, like I said, he's got those chin issues. He just seems to be hittable, but he also can pack a punch going the other direction. So Jason Witt has more than enough power in his hands to knock out Cole Williams as well. The under 2.5 is kind of the only way I'd look on this fight, but it's very, very sketchy, and it's a fight that I'm not really overly interested in getting involved with either way. Middleweight fight up next, we've got Sean Strickland taking on Jack Marshman. Now, this is another one where we've got just so many questions. Sean Strickland is a guy who is in a horrible accident, coming off a 2-year layoff. We don't really know what kind of shape he's going to be in, mentally, physically, anything coming into this fight, because that's the kind of accident, that's the kind of injury that some people just never fully recover from. Now, Jack Marshman on the other side, he's kind of like a John Phillips. He's a dude that plods forward. He's got big power. He's durable. He's got heavy hands, but he's very, very basic. We've got a total here again at 2.5 rounds. Over is minus 150. The under is plus 120. And I really would feel like this is a stay away spot. If I had to take a flyer on this one, I'd be taking a look at the under. I'd say that Sean Strickland has this guy outgunned basically everywhere, and he's going to be looking for that finish, meaning Jack is going to be on the defensive, and he's probably going to need that knockout in the second or the third round to be able to go home with a win here, because there's no way he's winning it on the judges' scorecards. If Sean is not 100%, if he's not the guy that he could be, Jack can probably get the knockout win. If Sean Strickland is the guy that he is capable of being, coming up a weight class, adding that extra muscle on him, if he comes out the way that he's capable of, then he should just slice through Jack Marshman like a hot knife through butter. So the under 2.5 is really the only way that I would be looking at here. But because there are so many questions around these guys, because there's questions around, the 2-year layoff, what condition Sean is going to be in, we can't really count on anything. This is a fireball and popcorn fight if I ever saw one. I'd be looking to sit back, just chill, wait this one out, and enjoy it, because it should be a fun show, but you really never know how it's going to end up playing. Next up, we've got UFC newcomers Adrian Yanez, who comes from the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, taking on Victor Rodriguez, who is a short notice replacement here for Aaron Phillips. We've got a total set at 1.5 for this one. We've got over 1.5 minus 130, under 1.5 is plus 100. And even though I am totally sold on Yanez, this kid, he looks like a young Jorge Masvidal, however you want to say it. This guy's got speed in his hands. He's got power. He's got technique. He's athletic. He's strong. He's taking on an opponent who's just one of these tough and gritty Alaskan fighters. He's not all that great. His skill set isn't where it needs to be. He's only 4-2, so he's not very experienced either. Everything is pointing the direction of Yanez. But this kid, Victor Rodriguez, is tough as nails, and he never quits. He's got a strong offensive grappling game, and even though I think he's going to be outgunned, I could see him hanging around. I'd be taking a look at this cheap over at minus 130, because I think Yanez does get the knockout, but I don't know if it's going to come quick. On the UFC Contender Series, he got the knockout in like 50 seconds. I think it was a bit of an early stoppage. So I think some people are maybe overestimating the amount of power that Yanez brings to this fight. I think he's got the knockout power. He's fully capable of getting it done. I just don't think it's always going to be that fast. It's not always going to be that early. And when the public perception is this guy's going to win by first round knockout, there's never any real value there, because the bookmakers know to include that in the line. So that over 1.5, I think, is kind of a sneaky way to play this thing if we can get Victor Rodriguez to just hang on for a little bit. Lightweight fight to end the prelims here. We've got Chris Gruetzemacher taking on Alexander Hernandez. Gruetzemacher is 14-3, and he's just kind of a bygone era fighter. He doesn't seem to be keeping up with the current state of MMA, and he's also coming off of a very long layoff. Alexander Hernandez, he's the new generation. He's the new blood. He's the next stage of evolution, and he's really rebuilding himself. He shot out like a rocket, just going straight for the top of the division, ran into way too many tough fighters, and he's getting that coveted step down in competition that almost nobody ever gets in the UFC. I fully expect Alexander to get it done here. It's just a matter of how. And this is another one where I would buy into the fact that Alexander Hernandez is looking for that 50 Gs. He's looking for a finish. He wants to make it fun, spectacular, and really stamp his improvements and show everybody that he's really back and deserving to be in that top 10 spot. But Chris Gruetzemacher is another one of these fighters who has made an absolute career out of just being tough and gritty and durable and not getting finished. So unless Alexander Hernandez wants to take this thing to the mat and snatch up some kind of a submission, I wouldn't be shocked for him to point fight his way to a 15-minute win just by being the more athletic, the faster guy than Gruetzemacher is. The total here is set at 2.5 rounds. We've got over -155, under +125. And again, this is exactly like the other fight we talked about on the card. I would want to play the under because I do think Alexander Hernandez is going to win this thing inside the distance somehow, but I can't trust him to do so. And I'm not getting two guys that are going to contribute to my loss because Chris Gruetzemacher, he doesn't have chin issues. He doesn't have a problem that I can see Alexander Hernandez clearly exploiting. Yes, I think Hernandez can submit him, but Gruetzemacher is a competent grappler. So unless Alexander Hernandez comes in with the mindset of I'm going to choke this guy out, there's no guarantees that that's going to happen. So this one could end up squeaking over. This is one that I'm just not going to put my money on because I think the line is about where it needs to be and I'm not getting what I need to roll the dice on that under. Bobby King Greene kicks off the main card, taking on Thiago Moises, and this is a really fun fight. We got the total set at 2.5 here. Over is -225. The under is +175, and this is a weird one because Bobby Greene has all the skills in the world. He's a great counter grappler. He's got a good get-up game, and he's got fast hands. He hits hard, but he just never seems to be able to put people away. At the end of round 3, he is always this close to taking his opponent out, but they somehow manage to squeeze right to the end of the fight. He can't ever quite pull it off. Taking on Thiago Moises, he's going to have a significant striking advantage. Moises, however, is going to have a great grappling advantage here. The question is, can he get Greene down? Can he keep Greene down? I don't think he's going to be able to. So more than likely, this fight is going to go over that 2.5 round mark. And if there's a finish, it's probably going to be Bobby Greene, and it's probably going to be in that last 60 seconds of the third round if it does manifest. So I can't look at the under on this one, even though both guys are dangerous, even though Thiago does have that chance to get a second round or a first round submission. I think you'd rather play Moises inside the distance or Moises by submission if that's the way that you're looking, because more than likely Greene is not going to get a knockout. If he does, it's going to be right on this 2.5 round mark that he starts to really ramp it up and go for it. Maurice Greene taking on Greg Hardy in the heavyweight division. These are some big boys, some big bodies. This one is intriguing to me. Maurice Greene is a rangy fighter. He's a guy that likes to stay on the outside, use his kicks, use his jab, be long, circle out. That's his whole MO here. And when he does that, he usually drags the fights into deeper waters. He's a guy that goes to decision more often than not. Greg Hardy is an up-and-coming talent. He's a guy that has been working very, very hard on his MMA game, and he's taking the appropriate steps up. The UFC has been giving him the right opponents to help him develop and help him grow. But he struggled with a rangy fighter in Alexander Volkov in his last fight, and Maurice Greene is going to present the same exact problems here. So I fully expect Greg Hardy to be able to come out here and beat Maurice Greene. I don't think Maurice Greene is that skilled of a fighter, and his only path to victory here is not going to be the knockout because Greg Hardy has an absolute brick of a chin. He's going to have a submission advantage, but he really needs this fight to go to the ground, and Greg Hardy doesn't take anybody down. I don't see this one hitting the mat whatsoever, so we're going to get a 15-minute stand-up war here. And Greg Hardy fully capable of knocking Maurice Greene out. We've seen that Maurice Greene just doesn't like to get hit, but if Greene is able to stick and move, he's able to front kick, he's able to circle out, this thing could get over. We've got a total here set at 1.5. The over is -110 or -120. We are pick'em pricing on this thing going over or under. And I'll be honest with you, I don't see Greg Hardy coming out and going for broke. That's never what he's done. He comes out, he's been very technical, very methodical. He's looking to beat his opponents up over the course of a fight. And with that reach disadvantage, I think Maurice Greene can stay safe until a little bit later in the fight. I wouldn't be shocked if Greg Hardy does end up getting the knockout because Maurice Greene has been known to gas out. But I don't know that he's going to get it done before the 2.5 minute mark of the second round. I'd definitely be interested in the over 1.5 in that heavyweight fight. We've got a middleweight tilt coming up here. Kevin Holland taking on Makhmud Muradov. This fight is really fun, guys. We've got an over 2.5 set at -215. The under 2.5 is 170. Now, this is a spot where we always talk about I need two fighters that are capable of contributing to my under hitting if I'm going to go ahead and take that side. Kevin Holland is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He can finish anybody on the floor. He's long. He's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage here. We've seen him knock people out on the feet as well. Makhmud Muradov, he's part of the money team. Floyd Mayweather put his stamp on this kid. He's the only MMA fighter that Floyd Mayweather said, "You're my boy." So that brings some heaviness. That brings some weight to it. He's in insanely good shape, and he's very, very technical, very skilled on the feet, and very capable of setting his opponents up. Now, Kevin Holland is very, very good at recognizing what his opponents are trying to do to him and then countering those. He's got those physical gifts, the length, the height, the reach, the athleticism to get himself out of those circumstances. These guys are going to go to war. And honestly, the under 2.5 is very intriguing here to me because Makhmud Muradov is a guy who sets people up and then he just crushes them with massive power shots. But he is completely open to being countered. He just hasn't fought an opponent who's capable of doing it yet. Kevin Holland is perfectly capable of doing it. Kevin Holland is not a guy that's easy to finish, but Makhmud Muradov has the power necessary to maybe possibly get it done. Plus, Kevin Holland making another quick turnaround. You just never know if that starts to wear and tear on the body. I more expect if anybody's going to finish, it's probably going to be Holland more so than Muradov, but we can't count Muradov out here. I would rather be looking at the under 2.5 here than the over 2.5 just because that plus 170 is extremely enticing. And in the small cage, dealing with the way these two guys match up, dealing with the reach advantage of Kevin Holland, I think somebody's going to eat a shot at some point through this fight. And it might be a little bit hairy. It might be late in that third round after they both beat on each other for some time. But I do think eventually one of them is going to hit the canvas. We got a featherweight fight for our co-main event. Really exciting matchup here between Bryce Thug Nasty Mitchell and Andre Touchy Fili. We've got a total once again set at 2.5 rounds. Over is minus 150, under is plus 120. Both these guys are not strangers to going over and hitting the judges' scorecards. But we have a very interesting striker versus grappler dynamic here. Bryce Mitchell could have made some leap and bounds improvements, but unless he has, Andre Fili is going to be the much better grappler here in this spot. Bryce Mitchell is the grappler of the two. So Fili's going to have the advantage on the feet. Bryce Mitchell is going to have the advantage on the ground, and we've seen the kind of wizardry that Mitchell is capable of on the floor. If Andre Fili hits the floor, he's got to pretend the floor is lava here in this spot. You do not want to go to the floor with a guy like Bryce Mitchell. So both guys fully capable of finishing. And if the fight happens in their realm, I fully expect them to want to end the fight as quickly as possible so they don't have to play with their opponent on the other side of this thing. We've got another 2.5 here. Over 2.5 minus 150. Under 2.5 is plus 120. And I don't know that I'll actually get to the window on this one because this is a very competitive fight and it could go a lot of different ways. But that plus money on the under is something that I think is very intriguing because Fili should have a significant advantage on the feet, and Mitchell should have a significant advantage on the ground. We've seen him lock up the twister. He has a way of just flowing on people if it gets to the floor. But we also saw a fight a little while ago, and like Chase Hooper, when he fought Alex Caceres, he wasn't able to implement the grappling, and when he wasn't able to implement the grappling, he basically just got lit up on the feet. Now, Fili has way more finishing power than a guy like Alex Caceres does, so if Bryce Mitchell is forced to stand with Fili for 15 minutes, I don't know that it's going to end particularly well for him. So the under 2.5 would be my lean, but again, not one I'm super confident in and not one that I'm necessarily going to bet. For the main event, we've got a middleweight fight between Uriah Hall and Anderson the Spider Silva. We're going to send Anderson off into retirement in style, and we've got a hell of a fight coming up here. Uriah Hall is this guy that's got that fast twitch muscle, and he can knock anybody out at any point in time. He can be a bit of a slow starter. He's had a bit of a hard time with his fights, just not quite being there mentally speaking, can't quite get into it, but when he is on, he destroys people. Now he's got Anderson Silva, who's going to be a willing dance partner, a guy that's not going to try and take him down, a guy that's not going to try to grind on him, and a guy who's had some injury issues. Anderson Silva, we've seen his legs chopped out from under him over and over and over again. He's coming off of a long layoff, and this is going to be his last fight ever. He will be hanging it up after this one. You just got to wonder where he's at. You know, I don't bet on retiring fighters because they've already got one foot out the door. They know that it's over. They know that this is it. And more often than not, when you're in the gym, when you got to push that extra little bit, you just kind of don't feel like it because you know you don't need to. This is the last one. You can cut that corner. So I am definitely not going to be counting on Anderson Silva to do much of anything here. We've seen his hesitancy to pull the trigger as of late, and that's one of the signs of a fighter really needing to be done, really needing to hang it up, because if you can't pull the trigger, you're not going to have an opportunity to win the fight. We've seen Uriah Hall get knocked out. He's got some questionable issues with his mindset, with his chin. We've seen Anderson Silva fully capable of knocking people out. We've also seen the durability issues of Anderson Silva, and he's 45 now. So that legendary chin, eventually it's going to turn. Eventually it's going to go. And Uriah Hall can knock absolutely anybody out. I think this is a really great spot for an under. The 4.5 is really something that I'm liking here. They've got it juiced -135 to the over 4.5. They're saying this is going to go the full 25 minutes. The judges' scorecards, the under 4.5 is +105. And that's the way that I would be looking, is that under 4.5, because Anderson Silva will either find a way to make this interesting and hit and hurt Uriah Hall, or Uriah Hall can just take a page right out of Jared Cannonier's book and attack that lead leg. If he attacks with big, heavy leg kicks, Anderson's knees have gone out time and time and time again. We've seen it over and over, and that's really the quickest path to victory here. And on top of that, if he throws a spinning heel kick at any point in time, the issue is going to be catching Silva, because Anderson Silva is still Anderson Silva. This guy still moves like the Matrix, and he can get out of the way of his opponent's shots. But if Uriah Hall happens to connect, it's lights out. It's over. So I would definitely be looking at the under 4.5 here on this fight. I just don't think that the 45-year-old man is going to be able to go the full 25 minutes with a young buck who still has title aspirations. And I think that Uriah Hall is not going to play this like Israel Adesanya did. Israel Adesanya had that respect level with his mentor, with his hero, the man he wanted to spend cage time with. He wasn't really going for the kill. He wanted to play the game with Anderson Silva. Looking at Uriah Hall, if you check out his Instagram, the dude is in the best shape of his life. It looks to me like he is coming to kill. I think he wants to make a statement. He was always said to be the next Anderson Silva. And I think he can realize that dream on Saturday with a big, big finish, a big statement win. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get a happy ending for Anderson Silva. I'd be looking at the under 4.5. That's Total Madness for UFC Vegas 12. Good luck on all your sports betting action this week, folks. Make sure you subscribe here to Odds HQ, and let's roll.